Good evening. In the UK robot combat scene, there are many different weight classes, just like in boxing. Today there are tournaments for heavyweights, middleweights, featherweights, beetleweights, antweights, down to the teensy nanoweight. But wait, excuse the pun, you may have noticed that something isn't quite right. It goes straight from middleweight down to featherweight. Is there nothing in between? Today, we discuss what happened to all the lightweights and other extinct weight classes, but we'll get to that. Let me introduce myself. My name is Mark Smith. I'm the team captain of Team Frey Robotics. I build beetleweights and antweights such as Sprocket Raccoon and Polaris, taking part in a few tournaments and hope to do more next year when the world stops going off its rocker with the current events. And I've been a big fan of robot combat ever since I first discovered it back in 1998 with the first series of Robot Wars. Joining me today, I have three guests. My first guest makes up one half of the Spinnerproof podcast, which is one I would definitely recommend. It is Ryan Bratley. Ryan, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me, and thanks for the little recommendation there. Always appreciate a plug.
Not a problem. My second guest today is a robot builder from America who came runner-up in Bugabot Series 2 with his Beetleweight Thunderchild. It is Nate Franklin. Hello, Nate.
Hello. Thanks for having me here.
You're welcome. And my third guest is a good friend of mine. His name is Jonathan Dixon, and we've been involved in a few little projects in the furry fandom together. John's just getting started in building robots himself. How are you doing, John?
I'm doing fine. Yeah, I'm that one person who hasn't finished his Beetleweight yet.
Well, we've got plenty of months to do that. So, what exactly is a lightweight? Well, in the United Kingdom, it is the weight limit that's above featherweight and below middleweight. Robots that weigh between 13.6 and 30 kilograms. The weight has changed a bit over the years, of course. The weight limit used to be a bit lighter. Nate, I imagine that the weight limit in America is a little bit different.
So it's 60 pounds, in the United States. So I'm terrible at math, so I forget what the conversion rate is.
I guess it's like 27 kilos or thereabouts, I would suppose. So I knew it was a little bit lighter.
Yeah. Because it's like, I think from kilogram to pound, it's like 2.2. So
Well, I think what we'll do is we'll start off with a bit of history. And if we go back to American Robot Wars 1996, there was weight classes for heavy, middle, light, and featherweight. And there were, I think, a total of 4 robots that competed in the lightweight tournament. You had the ultimate winner, SPS3, a wedge that didn't touch the ground, Happy Funbot, which had a big grin and a chainsaw for a nose, and there was also the Enforcer and Attila the Hun. The ultimate winner was SPS3. But of course, in Robot Wars, we started off with every weight class in Series 1. However, only one lightweight class robot actually appeared in the first series, and that was Eubank the Mouse, which was a stock robot, and yet it was incorrectly listed as a middleweight in the opening stats. So considering that there was only one proper lightweight in that series, you wonder how we ended up getting 6 in Series 2 for the lightweight tournament there.
Was Wizzwig not a lightweight?
Well, no, it was actually a featherweight, 10.8 kilos, but they labelled it as a lightweight for some reason, because Wizzywig's actually lighter than Cunning Plan.
I thought Psycho Sprout was a lightweight as well.
They listed it as a lightweight, but it actually weighed 24 kilograms, so it was actually 2 kilos over, well, just over a kilo over the original lightweight limit, which was 22 kilograms or thereabouts.
I'm guessing their definitions of it all were pretty loose back then.
Yeah, the original Robot Wars series has a lot to answer for, really, because they often, because a lot of the robots that were listed as middleweights and that would now be lightweights by today's standards, of course. And Tracy, which was labelled a heavyweight back then, would now be labelled as a middleweight.
Yeah, the original Robot Wars was fun because they were just kind of learning a lot of things. So they were just kind of, everything was really loose. They were somewhat going as they went along, which was kind of funny.
They needed robots to make up the numbers, and as it happens, Eubank the Mouse was a stock robot to make up the numbers. But in Series 2, we did get a lightweight championship of 6 robots. There was one unidentified entry, but of the entries that were identified, you had Damocles, Rosebud, Shadow Fiend, Spartacus, which was made by the team that would then go on to build the General in Series 3, and Superistrana, which was the champion for Series 2. It was a single melee, 6 robots, and Superistrana was declared the winner after every other robot got its butt kicked, but he was the one that was still the most mobile. However, we only ever see a brief highlight reel of that actual battle. We don't get to see it in full or anything like that.
And following that, I think the only lightweight action we ever saw again was, I think it was a side event in Series 7, I think, wasn't it? With Ellie's little pink boss and
Yeah, Extreme 2.
There was going to be an event for Series 3, which would include Slippery Strana defending its title, alongside newcomers Hazard, with 2 Zs, not 1, and Zippy. But that event was cancelled because a 4th contestant pulled out. So it didn't quite go the same way the super heavyweight competition was going to go, because that was cancelled because of a safety incident that was behind the scenes back in the pits. But the lightweight one happened to get cancelled because one of the contestants pulled out. And so, yes, we didn't get to see lightweights compete again until Robot Wars Extreme 2. And in the end, there was only 2 robots that contested the title, one of which didn't even work.
Whoopsies.
And even then, I think Typhoon Thunder was technically half of a clusterbot, wasn't it?
It was, because it was a clusterbot with Typhoon Lightning, and they competed in the middleweight tournament as well, alongside their big brother Typhoon. And Ellie's little pink bot, which was their opponent in the lightweight championship, didn't even start moving because the motors that they had in the robot were not powerful enough to even move the robot's weight.
You have to wonder how it got there at all.
Yep, so you have to wonder. It's no wonder that lightweight robots didn't catch on in the end, really.
It seems to me, and obviously we've only got a few seconds of highlights of the first one to go by, but it seems as though both of those fights just basically descended into house robots break things that are much smaller than them.
Yeah.
This is what happened in every Season 2 battle, pretty much.
Yeah, that was kind of Robot Wars' niche at the time, just to ensure entertainment through sort of wanton and completely unfair destruction rather than actual competitive battles. And the lightweights as a class seem to kind of bear the very worst of that.
Yes, when I was 11 or 12 years old, of course, I didn't really mind the house robots deciding the battles back then. But that's because I was a lot younger and more easily impressed. Today, of course, it wouldn't fly so well.
Of course, the main difference back then, of course, was very much the production team were treating it as a entertainment program and not really as a competition. So if it was going to jazz the fight up and make for interesting TV, then they'll break as many rules they need to.
Robot Wars had a handful of lightweights, but obviously the weight class didn't really catch on our side of the Atlantic. However, in BattleBots, during the classic run of the series, there was a full-on lightweight championship that was contested by quite a lot of robots, actually, including the Season 1 champion Backlash, which was a mini nightmare, Dr. Inferno Jr., which was the champion for Season 3 and 5, and of course Ziggo, Season 2 and 4 champion, which actually has a place in the Combat Robot Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think, obviously with the original run of BattleBots, it was a competition where if you showed up with a working bot, you got through safety, then you could compete, and if you were lucky enough to get deep in the bracket or you had an interesting bot, you could be put on TV. So it was definitely much more accessible for builders to build a lightweight bot as opposed to building like the heavyweights or super heavyweights.
And easier to transport.
Yeah. And you also had some cases where people were selling their old bots. So I remember watching BattleBots as a kid, and there was a bot called Slap 'em Silly. And the most notable thing about it was that it was built by a teenager. Well, no, it was purchased by a teenager off eBay, and then the teenager who drove it went on to do pretty well. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, we've all got to start somewhere after all. Slap 'em Silly, that was basically a simple four-wheel drive push bot, quite similar to my cousin's old robot Accelerating Impacts, which was in the featherweight class.
I suppose you could say that the lightweights were the Beetleweights of their day almost. One of the most accessible ones to get into, pretty easy, you can get parts for it relatively easy. And of course, as you say Nate, it was you arrive and you could have a go without too much expenditure, I would have thought.
Yeah. The weight limit back then would have been around 25. Well, it has always been £60, hasn't it? So 27 kilos. A weight like that is probably just too heavy for most people to be able to lift up by themselves, but 2 people could lift it up very easily, and you could transport it in your car very easily as well.
Yeah.
unlike the heavyweights and the middleweights, of course. And I'd like to make an honorable mention to one of my favorite lightweight robots, which was Alpha Raptor, which was kind of like Biohazard in that it had a 4-bar lifting weapon, but it was invertible. It could drive both ways up, and it was also a little bit dumpier looking, if you like. It wasn't as low down. But it then evolved, of course, into Beta Raptor and Gamma Raptor, and had performed pretty well in the series. And of course, Tentamushi, that was a lightweight robot in BattleBots, but it appeared in the Robot Wars Middleweight Championship, interestingly enough.
And it won it.
It did. I think it was a draw with A-Kill at first, but then they had a rematch or something in Robot War in the future series or something like that, and then Tentamushi was the winner there.
International League, they had the rematch, and yes, A-Kill was pitted. So yeah, Tentamushi walked away with it.
And of course, Lisa Winter, she's now a judge on BattleBots, isn't she?
Yep.
Yeah. She's been doing it longer than like 99% of the people that you see like actually competing.
Yeah. Now that was the classic series of Robot Wars and BattleBots, obviously. Small competition for lightweights in Robot Wars never really caught on. BattleBots, great big competition as we discussed. But then all of a sudden, things just kind of changed over the course of the last 2 decades. As when Robot Wars finally came back, there were ongoing featherweight championships hosted by the Fighting Robots Association since 2004, as with the heavyweight championships. Middleweights were by and large extinct as well until they made a small comeback in 2018, which we can discuss later. But lightweights never did get a championship. However, they did still exist in some form because in Robot Wars Series 10, the team Bigger Brother, they entered a cluster bot called the Swarm, which consisted of 4 robots going into the arena as one. And all 4 of these robots would have been in the lightweight class. You had Rubber Duck, that was a 24.5 kilogram pneumatic flipper, which was capable of flipping a motorcycle. You had Blender, which has been stated as weighing between 29 to 33 kilos. That's a bar spinner, and it probably would have been classed as a middleweight if it was over 30 kilograms. And then there was also Pinza and Sky, which weighed in the 20 to 30 kilogram range as well. So you had at least 3 lightweight class robots duking it out with the heavyweights.
I find it absolutely hilarious that just the members of the Swarm alone would have made the second biggest lightweight field in Robot Wars history if they were just all entered into a tournament together.
By themselves, yeah.
Oh my god.
The really unfortunate thing is, though, is that by themselves, if you were to stick them into a lightweight competition, they would probably all do pretty well.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I don't think... I think when it came to showing Crackers and Smash in Series 10, they were 2 middleweights. They were able to hold their own against the heavyweights very well, which may have helped encourage some people to start building middleweights again. Whereas in the case of the Swarm, the robots were all essentially cannon fodder because of their size. And true enough, they did score a victory over Donald Thump, but, well, that's Donald Thump we're talking about here. That was mostly a novelty robot anyway. And Blender was the only one that really actually did any damage as such.
This is not forgetting, of course, their various outings stateside in BattleBots as Crib Crawlies and the 4 Horsemen.
Yes, the 4 Horsemen, they basically entered 3 Blender-style robots plus a smaller wedge bot called Buttercup.
I thought it was interesting in like 2 of their appearances, they had to fight Double Jeopardy, a robot with a single projectile. So it must have sucked for Double Jeopardy because now they're in a rumble with not just 2 bots, but now 4 other robots, and now they have to make sure they choose the right target.
Noel Sharkey in Robot Wars had said during the commentary when the Swarm first appeared, "I don't know how you're supposed to fight these things." And, well, that rings true to this day if you're fighting a cluster bot that consists of 3 or more robots, I suppose.
Oh, absolutely.
But even with 2, it's quite tricky.
I do have to wonder, and forgive me if this is jumping ahead, if we'd see more of that style of clusterbot if there was an active lightweight class for them to go and enter sort of the rest of the year.
That sounds like something that would happen because
Definitely.
Because Crackers and Smash, they competed separately in the Fighting Robots Association Middleweight Championships, and Smash was actually the inaugural middleweight champion, if you like.
With Crackers not that far behind, if I remember rightly.
No, they came 3rd, I believe.
And yeah, some of those machines in the 4 Horsemen in the Swarm, again, they would most certainly hold their own in a dedicated lightweight tournament because, I mean, we've seen the kind of thing it can do. I mean, it was tearing pieces off of both Gamma 9. It was tearing pieces off of Double Jeopardy. I'm pretty sure it got a pretty great shot in against Behemoth as well.
Indeed. I think this robot's that small in an arena that big. It makes it a bit. It makes, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is and stuff, but imagine fighting antweights inside a heavyweight arena. It probably wouldn't be as exciting as fighting it in an antweight arena, I don't think.
It would be difficult to film, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Because I remember at RoboNerd last year, when we did the Content Creators Rumble, most of us, including myself, entered with a beetleweight-sized robot. But we had a couple of antweights in there. We had the Observer bot and Don't Worry, Sweetie, I'll Crump With You. And they weren't even the first ones to get eliminated, but you could tell that they had far more space to roam around in the arena and sometimes got stuck on the arena floor gaps, if you like.
Yeah, you definitely find that smaller robots do tend to get lost in a big space. Well, we saw that in the Featherweight Rumble in the first Robot Wars Extreme, where, the robots, they definitely had lots of room to move, but equally that gave them lots of room to miss each other as well.
At live events like Extreme Robots, that was one of the first events I went to, which was back in 2018. Because I was advised to go to an event and see for myself all these robots fighting. So I wasn't behind the scenes and stuff, but I did get to chat to quite a few roboteers in the passing and everything, which was pretty cool. You had featherweight rumbles that happened between the heavyweight segments to sort of act as a sort of warm-up for the crowd. So there was no winner declared, but you had like tons and tons of featherweights all in one arena. Although if you were to have a dedicated tournament, of course, you could only have it really as one-on-one or a melee of several robots, and that's when it all of a sudden looks a lot emptier.
At which point, the featherweight exhibitions, I suppose I should consider them exhibitions, they're more gladiator rumbles than they are like melees, I suppose you could say.
So then, I think it's now time we started to address just what happened to the lightweight class. And by extension, perhaps we could discuss what happened to maybe the middleweight and the super heavyweight class as well. But lightweight, of course, seems to be the one that people seem to forget about the most. That's why we're mentioning it. And personally, I am thinking that maybe perhaps there's just too many weight divisions, because does the leap from featherweight to heavyweight kind of make the lightweight and middleweight classes redundant, do you think?
I would definitely agree. I think because I've talked to a lot of other builders, and they say that, like, at least in the US, we do have way too many weight classes, and I've heard that some people say that the middleweight and heavyweight are a bit, like, I guess, redundant, because if you're building a middleweight, you're using similar components to a heavyweight, so you might as well just take that extra step and go towards the heavyweight. So, and I think in the case of the UK, when you have the heavyweight, middleweight, and lightweight, it was either the lightweight or the middleweight were bound. One of those was bound to not or to go defunct. So middleweights were just the lucky ones that ended up getting a resurgence, and the lightweights unfortunately went out of style.
I reckon that maybe the middleweights came back in a way because of the cost. Because a good heavyweight robot would cost about £3,000. That's how much the 2011 FRA champion Ripper is said to cost. But the middleweight equivalent, You Little Rip, I think, that one, I think, cost around £750. So that's quite a lot cheaper. And maybe that's why some people decided to start building middleweights again, because you can build a robot that can duke it out with heavyweights for a much smaller price, perhaps.
It's entirely possible. I mean, even back in the day, back in the 90s, when Robot Wars was up Series 2, you kind of even back then you saw lightweight as a division kind of being pushed aside a little bit. Because, I mean, as we've touched on already, we saw maybe a few seconds of a one-off fight.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much all we saw until like several years later when they turned up for an exhibition fight. So they were kind of being sidelined from really, really early on.
Featherweights had the novelty of being the smallest weight class in existence at the time, of course, which is probably why they kind of caught on a bit. In Robot Wars Series 2, there were only 4 featherweight robots that contested the featherweight championship, 6 lightweights and 3 middleweights. But when you come to Robot Wars Extreme 1, you had just 2 featherweights. But then when Extreme 2 came along, the featherweight championship then became something hotly contested, as was the middleweight championship. But lightweight, only 2 entrants, and like we said before, one of them didn't even work.
I get the feeling that with the way technology has progressed, particularly in terms of batteries,
yes,
if you took a lightweight from that era and gave it modern batteries, it would probably come out pretty much as a modern featherweight.
Yeah,
so I think
absolutely.
maybe that's why it's kind of gone to the wall.
That's a possibility, because Ellie's little pink bot weighed only 14 kilograms, which is just over the current UK featherweight limit. And NiCad batteries and lead acid batteries have fallen out of favor in favor of the lithium polymer battery, of course, and those were much lighter.
Yeah, I think with the technology leap is amazing. I know months ago, I think before BattleBots, the current season was filming, Team Liachi showed a really good comparison photo where they had the batteries and speed controllers and from the old bots versus the new ones, and you could see the drastic change in weight. And no, and that, like you were saying, it would have turned a lightweight from the late 90s, early 2000s down to a featherweight.
Yes. So there's a possibility Alpha Raptor could have been a featherweight. In fact, you could argue that today's featherweights are like the lightweights from the past, because the same idea. They just have lighter batteries and components, thanks to technology.
And it also helps that for something like a feather, there's always been quite easy access to parts, if only in terms of the fact that for so long everyone was using drill motors. Something really easy to get hold of, really easy to modify. And where it started with that, there's an industry, a very small industry, but an industry nonetheless that's grown around it in terms of, oh, here's a set of go-to ESCs. And once you have a class established, you end up with the components being easy to get. Advice is easy to get. It's the same for beetles and ants. We've got such easy supply of parts that there's really not that much reason to go into another weight class.
Exactly, because if you were going to be going up from featherweight class, you'd be as well just to go straight up to something bigger and heavier. My cousin, Andrew Smith, who has competed in American events for like the past 2 decades now, since he was a kid and everything, he says that American robots, especially in the featherweight class, have a lot higher kinetic energy in general, and it will make arenas too expensive for weights above the 30-pound class. Featherweights have a higher power-to-weight ratio than the heavier robots, and lightweights would require bigger and sturdier arenas than the featherweights. So it could all be down to cost as well.
Oh, absolutely. The featherweights are pretty brutal, and I know, like, we've had one event in the we used to have 2 full combat featherweight events in the Northeast, but now we're down to 1 because one of the arenas won't handle it, and we don't own the arena. The venue owns the arena, and they're not really interested in upgrading it for a one-day event.
The UK featherweight championship, which was until this year contested every year, of course. That's been getting to see some really frightening robots starting to appear there now. Of course, you have the current champion X303, which is built by Cosmin Gorgovan. It's the bigger brother of X301, if you like, which is the UK beetleweight champion. Well, the European beetleweight champion, if you like. And then, of course, you've got Get Shrek'd, one of the most terrifying vertical spinners there is, and it would easily be able to trash a robot that was probably double its size, if you like.
We could probably list so many other destructive robots.
Yeah.
There's Telekinesis, Captain Jack, Binky, so many great spinners in that class.
Yeah, Neon as well.
And I'd also argue that, are you necessarily going to have more fun with lightweights than we currently are with feathers? Is a heavier robot inherently more fun to build, maintain, fight with, and watch? I'm really not convinced that it is.
I think exactly the same thing has happened to. That's exactly what's happened to super heavyweights. Like, I kind of thought about it when I was watching classic BattleBots, thinking that, super heavyweight, it sounds really cool, but when you actually watch a heavyweight fight and a super heavyweight fight side by side, it's, unless you were told, it would be pretty difficult to tell them apart unless you knew the robots pretty well.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
If you were to put a featherweight robot and a heavyweight robot side by side, you see an obvious size difference. But there isn't really much space for what's in between, really, when you think about it. Super heavyweights, as you said, aren't really that much bigger, noticeably bigger than a normal heavyweight. But, of course, you need a much bigger and beefier arena to contain them.
Yeah, and then obviously with super heavyweights, it comes down to the cost. And if you look on the Team Run Amok, who won page, and you can see for Robo Games, the super heavyweight class, every year the field shrinks until it's down to like the last year of super heavyweight. There were only like 2 bots, so it was like best of 2 out of 3.
It was interesting to watch the super heavyweight events at Robo Games because it was quite popular for a little while because you had great hitters like I'm pretty sure Super Megabyte. You had names like Super Megabyte in there. You had the Judge, which was
Dissector.
Yeah,
one of my favorite ones.
Yeah, which were all amazing and fun to watch.
The other thing, of course, is that the heavyweight limit in the UK used to be 80 kilograms, and then it became 100, and now it's 110. And a lot of the super heavyweight robots that competed in the earliest season of like Robot Wars and everything, they would now be modern day heavyweights. My uncle built a robot called Rolling Thunder, which was going to contest the super heavyweight class. It weighed around 84, 85 kilograms. Today, it would have, if it was still in existence, it would be a normal heavyweight. So that's kind of what kind of pushed the super heavyweight class away a bit, I think.
Well, it would be quite a light heavyweight by today's standards.
Indeed.
Wasn't Barry the first robot to ever get eliminated from Robot Wars, the super heavyweight?
It was, yes.
It would have been interesting to see if the sport would have changed at all, at least in the UK, had Barry not been eliminated in the gauntlet.
Barry was, and it was a stock robot that went through instead of Barry as well. Barry would have done well in the sumo round, but it was also the heaviest robot in the field, 114 kilograms. I think the only other robot that was in the super heavyweight category at that time was Dreadnought, which weighed 91 or so. And even then, they made Dreadnought lighter for Series 2.
Barry, now that I think about it, you mentioned the weight. I'm pretty sure that's actually heavier than all the bots currently on the modern day battle bots, like the 250 pounds. So it's really interesting.
It's still heavier than the modern day Robot Wars weight limit as well.
And then the Series 2 super heavyweights, they were everywhere. Like you had robots like Demon Duck, which went up to like 165 kilograms, which is, I'm pretty sure that's over what would be considered the super heavyweight limit for like a non-walking machine.
I find all the arguments around weight classes fascinating in general. There's often a call for sort of 1-pounders in the UK, and I can never decide whether I'm on board with that or not, because in one sense, it seems like a really nice class to build to. You know, ants are a bit fiddly.
It is a really fun class.
But at the same time, you are sort of worried about diluting the builder base.
Yeah, I'd love to see like US ants in the UK, but I do understand the issue with there's too many weight class and stuff like that. And like at least with the UK ants to US ants, there is a bit of a noticeable difference. It's not like I've heard like there was, I think at one point there was going to be super ant weights, which was like 250 grams, but you're like, it's too close to regular ant weights and it's too far from US ant weights, so you really can't justify it.
At that point, you almost want to say you just create like just a one-off weight class for like a one-off event. If you want to set people a challenge or something, like say, okay, one-off event, weight limit is this, and then everybody brings it for that one event or something like that, if they wanted to do something like that.
Yeah, in America, of course, they have many different weight classes between beetleweight and featherweight, because you've got things like mantis weight, hobby weight, dodge weight, or whatever it's pronounced as.
Doge weight, I think.
Doge weight, there we go.
That one's an interesting one because we have the hobby weight and then the 15-pound Doge weight, but the 15-pound was actually originally created as like an educational thing for college and high school teams, which is how a lot of people who would go on to be on BattleBots got started. So it's a really like interesting debate. They're trying to decide if they should keep one or the other, and because I mean, like if you have a 12-pound bot and they stick with 15-pound bots, you now have 3 pounds to work with. But if you have a 15-pound bot and they get rid of the 15-pound class, then you do either have to do a complete rebuild or take a considerable amount of weight out of it.
Yeah, I suppose an overweight featherweight today would be technically classed as a lightweight, but of course they wouldn't. If there even was a lightweight championship, they wouldn't really be competitive against robots that were like over twice their size.
If we did have a lightweight championship, I predict we'd get a lot of feathers joining forces as clusters.
Yeah.
Either that or possibly might even get feathers, but with beefed up armor or something like that, possibly.
Mm-hmm. But when you think about it, the weight classes that have caught on have caught on for good reason, because heavyweight is the classic weight class that you see on Robot Wars and BattleBots. It's basically the ultimate holy grail, if you like. Featherweight caught on because it was a much smaller weight class, but it was also considerably more accessible for people working on a budget or for roboteers with less skill sets and everything. And of course, the components are much easier to get hold of. And then with the insect weights that came along afterwards, Antweight was originally the only insect weight robot that really caught on. We had a regular Antweight World Series like 3 or 4 times a year. And of course, these were very small robots within the realms of model making, cheap, easy to build. And it's only in the last few years that Beetleweight, which is 1.5 kilos in the UK, a little bit less in the US, 1.36 kilos or 3 pounds, that is now caught on in spades, I think, because people, after Robot Wars was cancelled again, people have started to get more interested in the sport, and Beetleweight has become a great starter class to get involved in.
Yeah, it's definitely... Beetleweights are probably... Well, they're also, as far as insects are concerned, probably like one of the more enjoyable to watch in person because just the power to weight ratio.
Yes, I find it more fun to... You get much nicer hits with Beetleweights than you do with Antweights, I would say.
And we were talking about the super heavyweights. I was looking on the wiki, just doing a bit of research, and the heaviest robot to have ever been on Robot Wars that was not a walking robot, which I don't remember the weight to the walkers off the top of my head, was 166.1 kilograms. And
was that Demon Duck?
It's called Rotor or Osh.
Rotor.
It was one of the robots that was eliminated in the qualifiers because you had 12 super heavyweights and in 3-way melees, and the winner of each melee would then go on to the final that was then shown on Robot Wars Series 2 grudge matches.
Rotor Osho was also the robot which ran amok and nearly destroyed the entire set.
Crazy, and a robot that size as well.
It's heavier than all the super heavyweights on the original run of BattleBots, which is crazy.
It was enormous.
Yeah, and of course in BattleBots today you've now got Chomp, which is 500 pounds, which is, well, double the standard weight limit, I think, at least. And it can apparently right itself with its own pickaxe, and can you imagine the noise that thing would make if it flipped itself back over? Or if Hydra was able to somehow flip it over.
That thing apparently jumps when the hammer fires. That is just terrifying in thought.
There's a lot of power involved in these things, which is probably just as well super heavyweight robots don't really exist anymore.
Chomp is the only super heavyweight we need. Nothing else is required.
I think Chomp is the only robot we need. That's peak robot. We can't go any further.
I don't know. Gloomweaver looks pretty great.
Okay, so for some closing on this podcast, is there any way we can really bring the lightweight class back? And also, is there really any need to? Because what was it that we saw? What was it that made the middleweight class make a comeback? Could the same thing be applied to lightweights?
Well, the thing which I think you should clarify is what you mean by brought the middleweight scene back. Because from what I understand, it's primarily... or the middleweight scene is primarily a short series of fights which is held at Extreme STEM, I believe, and then one-off exhibitions in the middle of Extreme Robots.
And you've only got about a dozen robots or so that compete in the middleweight class at the moment as it stands anyway, if that.
Yeah, so it's hard to say whether or not it's genuinely, had a return to form, so to speak, yet. But it is great to see more middleweights competing and stuff, because some of them are getting really, really good. Like Raphael. Raphael is an amazing creation. I loved it. So yeah, if we can get more stuff like Raphael or just more innovation in middleweights, then that would be brilliant.
Perhaps the future if there ever was to be a lightweight championship, it would probably be a sideshow event during the heavyweight event rather, where you have like a handful of robots that contest a sort of sideshow event, perhaps a bit like what Fleaweights and Nanoweights do at Antweight World Series events.
Would you like to see a BattleBots made web series featuring lightweights?
Possibly, yeah.
Wait, like made by BattleBots, you mean?
Just like a thing to do in the off season. Kind of produced by them, but You
mean like a sub championship with smaller robots?
Yeah, just something to do in the off season, something like that can get more people involved.
That's a great idea, but I think if you're going to do it, then surely do it in the most accessible weight classes for newcomers.
Which would be featherweight, I would
good.
presume, in America nowadays, because as
featherweights or beetleweights, but beetleweights might be a bit difficult because I don't think not every person is going to be interested in the smaller bots when you've been accustomed to the bigger ones.
You got a lot of people in America who have spades for hands and everything, and a lot of people in Britain are like that as well, who would probably find it a bit difficult to work on robots that small.
That's always been my issue with ants, but I think beetleweights are a fantastic mid-ground for a beginner.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yes, a lot of people who currently only watch BattleBots will probably have this idea of, oh, how fun can that really be?
Surprisingly
But
fun.
if we're going with this sort of idea of, well, we're going to do a whole series to show how good they are, I think you could incentivize people that way. So if that were to happen, which unfortunately is probably not, I think that would probably be the way to take it.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the audience at BuggleBot Series 1, and that's what turned me onto the idea of beetleweights, pretty much.
I mean, you could even get away with something like what they did in Robot Wars Extreme, where they did have like a one-off thing where they showed off all the ant weights, which had turned
that was really cool.
It was a lot of fun, and as you saw, there was quite a much bigger pool of ant weights for the series that followed. So whether or not they can just have something like that, something really fun, really exciting, but you can just kind of put in between the main competition as an exhibition to get people excited about the idea, I think would probably want to go a long way, but it would probably do okay, I think.
I remember for videos that were for shows like Robots Live, while people were taking a break, like during the interval, if you like, there was a smaller arena that was across from the audience for beetleweights, so people could still get some entertainment while they were waiting for the heavyweight events to start again.
Yeah, and I think also with just introduction to the smaller classes, it doesn't necessarily just have to be like a full-on side event, but I remember how in the original the reboot of Robot Wars, you did have during the tech segments with the judges, they did mention the fact that
ant weights and beetleweights were.
And also there was the one video from BattleBots where Jenny Chaff was taking a fan around, and he actually identified Drizzle from Team Monsoon, which I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. And of course, when you looked at Robot Wars Series 10, the robot push to exit had the Antweight robot Rusty sitting on top of it during the pit segment.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure any of these things really translate into a scene, do they? It's lovely that there's recognition of what's already happening, but in terms of trying to get what in the UK at least would basically be a new weight class off the ground. We've maybe mentioned double digits existing lightweights.
Yeah, perhaps one reason why people are still going to build robots for featherweights and heavyweights is because a lot of events exist for these robots, and a lot of people build robots for this event. You're not so likely to have the incentive to build lightweight or middleweight class robots if not many other people are building them, and there's not really any events to take them to.
It's kind of a vicious circle, because when you have side events, you're basically relying on people who are probably already at your event bringing another robot along. Or you're relying on people who are newcomers just deciding to try that one, and let's face it, potentially not having a very nice experience because of it. Or you're relying on people who just really want a trophy, going, there won't be much competition there. And I don't think any of these things really build a class. There are lots of builders, I think I'm really one of them, who, while, gladiators at the end of a tournament are fun, but if I'm building and going to a tournament, I want some 1v1 fights.
Of course.
Yeah.
I want to test my robot in the environment that it is built for. And turning up to a weekend where you do a couple of rumbles as a sideshow doesn't really scratch that itch for a lot of people.
No, not for me anyway. I'm building a featherweight robot at the moment called Yippee Coyote. Yep, that's a name drop there. And I want to be taking that to proper one-on-one style events. I want to go somewhere where there's an actual sense of competition, where I can really test my skills. You know what I mean?
Are you running it as a sportsman?
Initially, I'm building it as a sportsman, but with the option of probably becoming a full combat robot eventually.
That's the exact route we're taking with the Feather as well, funnily enough.
Yeah, because I'm already quite accustomed to building, because my beetleweight robots are full combat, as are my antweights and everything. And I'm really getting good at that weight class, though I say it myself, when it comes to at least building them and understanding them. Featherweight, though, is like another big leap up and everything. And I would suppose that the heavier weight classes like lightweight and middleweight are perhaps just a leap too far, even if they were cheaper to build.
Yeah, lightweights just kind of sit in that unfortunate sore spot, you could almost call it, which is slightly too expensive to,
They're basically just they're too big, and yet they're too small at the same time. They're too small compared to the heavyweights, and they're too big compared to the featherweights, I feel like.
Yeah, they sit in a really awkward spot. So it's a real gamble as to whether or not you'd want to start building for one, because you might as well just, I guess, put your resources into building something that more people are going to be competing with.
It's a poetic thought, and I think we can close by saying that perhaps maybe the lightweight class didn't die after all. Maybe it still exists, but now in the form of the featherweight class, because as we discussed earlier, a lot of the components that we use in our robots today are a lot lighter and smaller than the ones that were used 20 years ago, back when the lightweight class was still pretty much king in BattleBots.
Or maybe it was a case that the lightweight class, at least in the UK, just never really arrived or established itself.
Unlike the featherweight class, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Either way, we have discussed today what did happen to all the lightweights, and to an extent what happened to the super heavyweights as well, and other weight classes that kind of fell by the wayside. I'd like to say thank you to Jono for joining us, as well as Ryan and Nate too. All three of you, you've been great fun, great company, and I thank you for joining me on my first podcast.
No problem at all.
Thanks for having us.
In the meantime, with everybody else, I hope you stay safe during these uncertain times, and happy roboteering, and we will look forward to seeing you again at some events when we can finally get to go to them. Take care.